Am I wrong? Daughter says, am I wrong for asking my GF to eat food she doesn't like in order to travel with me? So I've been dating my girlfriend for about 4 months now. Everything's been going great. She moved to our state about half a year ago, and she's from a state where there's not a lot of diversity in food, both in terms of cuisine and in terms of ingredients. It's mainly just meat and potatoes in her state. In fact, she had Korean food for the first time after we started dating, and she told me she had only had Asian food a few times before we met, which gave me a chuckle. Anyway, my state is known for amazing restaurants and the highest diversity in food, and I love trying new restaurants. She's, however, a rather picky eater. While she's not a vegetarian, she prefers plant-based while consuming some meat, and she dislikes seafood, which is a result of her state having no fresh seafood or good seafood restaurants. I've been trying to be mindful of her preferences, and we go to places where she has plenty of options. Here's the issue. I go on vacation to Japan every year and planned on doing the trip in the next 2 months. I really enjoy going to new places there as well as going back to the old favorites. It's mostly a food trip for me with some shopping and cafe hopping in between. My GF knows I'm going on the trip and has expressed how much she'd like to go to. So I invited her to come with me with the premise that she actually eats some seafood and meat. For those who don't know, Japanese chefs don't mess around. You cannot go to a omakase place/sushi bar without eating what they serve you, with slight changes based on preference. You cannot go to a ramen place and expect vegetarian broth, as 99% of ramen places use pork or seafood broth. Nor can you go to those restaurants and not order anything but take up a seat. Then there's all the other places that specialize in wagyu, tonkatsu, yakiniku, yakitori, which are all heavily meat based, though she can be accommodated there. However, there's no chance for this trip to not include plenty of sushi and ramen. She has agreed to try more seafood and develop a better tongue for it. But I can tell she's really not excited, nor does she truly understand what I mean when I say she literally won't have options at certain places. She still doesn't get why she can't go to an omakase place and just order some Californian roll, and she still thinks she can just sit there without ordering anything. I feel kinda bad about this, as I don't really want to force her to eat things she doesn't like, and it's clear she's not enthusiastic about eating seafood. On the other hand, I can accommodate her at times, but I can't plan the trip completely around her diet. This makes me feel pretty bad, because I feel like I'm forcing her to do what she doesn't like in order to go on a trip with me. Am I in the right to ask her to do that? I'd much rather go on the trip by myself as originally planned, if we have to go by her eating habits. Too long. Didn't read. GF wants to go to Japan with me, but I told her I'm not willing to bring her unless she loosen up. Snowwoods4839 says, go without her this trip. If she is around next trip, take her then. Daughter says, I think I just might do that. I don't think it's too feasible for someone who doesn't like seafood to develop a taste for sushi in 2 months. Oka3 says, my girlfriend and I went to Tokyo together, and she promised that she would try everything before we went. Our first sushi spot was a conveyor belt where she first special ordered a cucumber roll to dip her toes in. She spat it out right in front of the chefs. It had wasabi she wasn't expecting, and refused to eat any sushi the rest of the trip. I didn't get to go to the nice omakase place I wanted to go to. Don't trust picky eaters that tell you they'll change when they get there. Luckily my girlfriend enjoyed ramen, BBQ, and lots of other foods, but I still feel like I missed out. OK Control 787 says, just explain to her what you just wrote. It's a trip largely centered around food, in a culture where picking and choosing isn't easy, and where you plan to eat out for most meals, with a cuisine she has little idea what she'd be comfortable enough to eat sufficient to survive the trip. If I were you, I'd do that and then decide whether she's worth taking. Depending on her answers, she might obviously make the trip miserable, or might at least credibly state she's open and willing to try new things, and in the meantime, will try some local Japanese restaurants with you to get a sense of what she likes. Japanese food is pretty far off from what she's probably used to. I'd be pretty miserable babysitting someone, making sure they're fed while they complain that everything is weird and they can't communicate with anyone around. Daudable says, "Thank you for the advice. I think I'll just start by taking her to some Japanese restaurants first. It might just be too much to plunge into an entire country with unfamiliar cuisine for someone who has a pretty limited appetite for food types." My feeling was, she really doesn't understand what I mean by there being nothing for her to eat at sushi, ramen, tonkatsu, and yakiniku places, and she thinks there's some side salad she can order or something. Perhaps it's too soon for a trip like that. Mokalat says, "Yeah, it's too soon. She is thinking Japan will be like a Japanese restaurant, which isn't even close to reality. You will end up having to plan your entire trip around her eating habits, and it's going to make it less enjoyable for you. She needs to expand her palate first before going. Ask her to learn more about the culture and try more of Japanese food. Get her a nice gift while you are there." LA77 says, "There are loads of veggie options in Japan, FYI. Okonomiyaki is the food of the gods. Pancakes with bean paste, rice cakes with cheese, tofu as much as you can eat in every shape and form. Sweet potato, vegetables, vegetables, vegetables. I lived there for 2 years and ate very little meat or fish, maybe a few times a week maximum. What you're actually saying is you want to eat a meat and fish heavy diet, which is perfectly fine, but don't be disingenuous about it. If you think she's going to ruin your experience, go alone, but if you go every year, maybe you could share the experience with her and compromise this year. You know, compromise the thing strong relationships are built on. You may enjoy experiencing a different side to Japan." Busted in Chevy Window says, "Yeah, and it may be rude for her to sit without eating at restaurants, but then just go solo and she can do something that interests her while he does his food exploration. Lol. It's clear that he just isn't willing to compromise on food, and neither is she, and their diets have different priorities in their lives. Nothing wrong with that, but it's clear trying different foods is an important hobby to him and not so much to her. If she wanted to visit Japan, I'm sure there's plenty of snack/convenience store ramen or meals, rice, etc. that she could survive fine off of. It's just a bigger priority in his life to go to restaurants than her. I'm sure there's very picky Japanese people who find a way around it, lol. Same as in every country, just with different restaurant customs. I think Op just has a bigger problem with her diet than he's letting on/admitting to himself. Edit. He shouldn't go to Japan alone. He should just dine in alone while she does her own thing." LA77 says, "Yeah, all valid points. She genuinely wouldn't have a problem eating vegetarian and even vegan in most restaurants in Japan, though, from street vendors to upscale foodie places. Just saying, the food thing is a big deal here, isn't it? Meat lovers can be very hot and militant and seem to get offended by veggies and vegans. You're right, Op isn't happy." Am I wrong? Wearyship 9954 says, "Am I wrong for running away because I didn't want to go on a walk? This whole situation took place a few weeks ago on Monday. My M17 dad, M56, was out of town at a meeting, and his wife, F54 I think, IDRTBH, was in charge of picking up me and my sister, F15, from school and then taking us to a meeting we had that night. Everything was fine, and my dad's wife had said that we had to do a load of laundry or she wouldn't take us to the meeting due to court orders that say 1. She isn't allowed to parent or discipline us, and 2. My parents aren't allowed to keep us from extracurricular activities like this as a punishment. She isn't even allowed to do this. But a load of laundry isn't a big deal, so neither my sister or I mentioned it. So we get the load done and put away, but my sister forgot to put a sweater away. My dad's wife saw it and went to yell at her. She then proceeded to say she would not take us to the meeting, and we weren't allowed to ask our mom or anyone else to take us. Because situations like this are fairly common with her, I just texted the person in charge of the meeting and let them know we couldn't make it. I then informed my dad's wife that I had done this. She leaves our room with the door open, so my sister goes to close it. As she does this, my dad's wife comes back yelling that we aren't allowed to shut it and she doesn't want us to. A huge fight breaks out where my dad's wife walked away, my sister slammed the door, and my dad's wife came back saying she was gonna call the cops on us. I asked what law we had broken. For a bit of context, I'm currently studying law in school and know way more about it than she does. She then said it was for assault and that we hit her with the door. I asked her to show me her injuries, but she refused. The fight ended with her leaving to call the police and us shutting the door. When my dad got home, he listened to his wife's story and refused to hear mine and my sister's stories. He then tried to take our phones, which he isn't allowed to do because they belong to my mom. Normally I wouldn't care, but I was mad at his bias. He also told us this wasn't a punishment, he just wanted our phones for the night. He didn't listen to our stories until Friday night, where he called us out separately to tell our stories in front of him and his wife. He promised to listen and not interrupt, but his wife kept interjecting and saying I was lying. I told him the story and told him how I didn't feel safe at his house and constantly felt like running away. I eventually got fed up and left because I didn't want to be gaslit and further. Also in this interrogation I asked where she was harmed again, but she refused to tell me. Heathily73 says, "Nope, not wrong. It sounds like there have been a lot of problems with her, since the co has things directly stating what she can't legally do. Your father is opposed for even staying with this woman. I would talk to your social worker and tell them that you don't feel safe in your father's home and that both she and your father violate the co. Not all step parents are like this, but this one really is a good case of how to be a shitty step parent. I say this because I'm also a stepmom to a 17-year-old, and never have we had the issues your stepmom has. She shouldn't have married a man with kids if she couldn't deal with the reality of it." Wearyship9954 says, "Thank you, this makes me feel a lot less shitty lol." Chrisin Bliss says, "You aren't wrong at all. You should tell your mom all this as it's all going against court orders and your dad seems perfectly fine with it. Going against court orders is such a big no-no." A-Type Self says, "Yeah, saying it's not a punishment doesn't give him the right to take a means of communication away from you. Especially one he didn't pay for. He didn't want you to call your biological mother. Definitely tell any therapist, social workers involved what is going on. Obviously something happened to have that type of thing in a court order, which is concerning. Make sure your mom knows everything that is going on." Old King 7199 says, "Not the asshole, I'm sorry that you are going through this. I don't understand why they want you to come back if your dad's wife is just going to abuse her power over you. If only you and your sister could reject visitation to your dad's house. I hope other things are going better in your life. In the future, I would go no contact with your dad who enables this behavior, or at minimum never go to his house where it resides. If possible, record every interaction with that thing living with your dad." Bearded One says, "Goddamn man, I'm so sorry you're going through this bullshit." Shansu says, "I'm kind of confused about the custody situation, but you're 17. If you have any other option for living situation, I'd take it. I also don't see where didn't want to go for a walk comes into all this." Existentialist says, "They are both abusive and controlling. I'm a therapist who works with abusive and controlling people, and I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. Absolutely none of their behavior is your fault. None at all. Don't let their shitty behavior tarnish your own opinion of yourself. I wish you the best. Unsanctioned 86 says, tell your mama and have her bring it up in court. Done. Yeah, dad's balls will shrink until he gets home and either takes it out on her or surrenders and puts balls in her purse. Make signed statements that can be shown in court too. This being said, it's not really a good idea to go or stay there at the moment, and if your dad asks, tell him he made his choice in bed. Hope all goes your way, mate. Tex Marifornia says, yep, you're the asshole. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.